headlines, yet another beheading of a British national by Islamic State militants and a threat to kill another hostage from the United Kingdom. Korean teen golfer Kim Hyo-ju wins the Avian Championship in France, clinching her first career LPGA major victory. And from South Korea's prospects to North Korea's participation, we have a preview of the 17th Incheon Asian Games kicking off this Friday.
Welcome to Primetime News. Hope your week is off to a great start. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Chery. Thanks so much for joining us. We start with another beheading of a hostage by Islamic State militants, a 44-year-old British national who was in Syria on a humanitarian mission.
International leaders have rallied support to suppress the terrorist group. UK Prime Minister David Cameron, in particular, sounded the alarm to act against what he calls the embodiment of evil. Our Shin Se-min has more.
British Prime Minister David Cameron has promised justice for murdered aid worker David Haines. At a meeting of the government's Emergency Response Committee on Sunday, Cameron said his murderers, those belonging to the Islamic State, were the embodiment of evil and precisely why Britain and the world needed to destroy them.
They are killing and slaughtering thousands of people, Muslims, Christians, minorities across Iraq and Syria. They claim to do this in the name of Islam. That is nonsense. Islam is a religion of peace. They are not Muslims, they are monsters.
The beheading of the 44-year-old aid worker has increased the pressure on Cameron to counter the IS threat, this as they've threatened to take the life of another British national, Alan Henning. The international community is circling the wagons. Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott pledged on Sunday to deploy 600 troops to the Middle East to aid the U.S.-led campaign against the terrorist group. He said the first set of 200 military personnel would arrive in the United Arab Emirates in the next couple of days. In response to the latest IS video release, U.S. President Barack Obama said America would stand shoulder to shoulder with England as part of the broad coalition of nations being formed to fight the militant group. Some 40 countries, including 10 Arab states, have so far offered their support in countering the threat. U.S. officials say that some of the Arab nations have even offered to join in airstrikes against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And meanwhile, Korea's National Security Advisor Kim Kwan-jin is in the U.S. for talks with his counterpart Susan Rice, and the two will discuss various topics, including providing aid to the U.S.-led fight against the Islamic State group. Park Ji-won fills us in.
Speaking upon his arrival in Washington for a 4-day trip for talks with U.S. officials, Kim Kwan-jin said Korea is looking at diverse ways, mostly in terms of humanitarian support, to help U.S.-led efforts to defeat Islamic State militants.
Korea has already provided some $1.2 million in aid for Iraqi refugees. I think Korea can look into giving some additional support.
When asked about the possibility of Korea joining in military action such as logistics support, Kim said the U.S. has yet to make an official request to Seoul. During his stay, Kim will meet with his American counterpart Susan Rice and other senior U.S. officials for discussions on a wide range of issues, including North Korea and the South Korea-U.S. alliance. Regarding the postponement of the transfer of wartime operation control from the U.S. to South Korea, Kim said talks will continue at an annual defense cooperation meeting set to be held next month in Washington. Seoul hopes to postpone the transfer by some 5 to 7 years from the currently set schedule of the end of 2015. When asked about the possibility of introducing the U.S. high-altitude missile defense system THAAD to South Korea, Kim said there had been no further discussions, nor had there been any agreement on the issue. Kim added the focus of his visit will be issues surrounding the Korean peninsula, including North Korea's nuclear and human rights issues, as well as American detainees in the north. Kim is scheduled to return to Seoul on Wednesday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
A drone, presumably from North Korea, has been discovered in the waters off the western side of a border island. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff said a fisherman collected the wreckage of the manless aircraft this afternoon near Baekneungdo Island. The military said it was similar in appearance to a North Korean drone that was found in the south earlier this year, and that an investigation has been launched to determine its purpose and the timing of its crash. 64 years ago today, the first shots were fired in one of the most important battles of the Korean War. When the Battle of Incheon ended 4 days later, the course of the Korean War had been altered, giving the advantage back to the South. To honor and reflect on those who sacrificed their lives, a ceremony was held on Monday at the site of the battle. Our Kim Hyun-bin was there for this report.
On June 25, 1950, the Communist North launches a surprise attack. Within 3 days, North Korean forces have invaded Seoul, and a few days later, North Korea has the majority of the South in its grasp, with the exception of the southern port city of Busan. Weeks pass, and hopes fade, but on September 15th, the Allied forces, led by General Douglas MacArthur, begin to turn the tide. Some 75,000 troops and 261 vessels launch an amphibious invasion. The Battle of Incheon, as is known today, ends in a decisive victory for the United Nations. To commemorate the battle, a ceremony was held where it took place on Monday. More than 2,200 people attended, including Korean War veterans and government and military officials.
If it wasn't for the Battle of Incheon, the Republic of Korea would not exist. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the veterans from all 63 countries.
To provide a better understanding of the historic battle, soldiers from the Korean Navy and Marines staged a reenactment using Aegis destroyer and various air and sea landing crafts. It brought back painful memories for some in attendance, who lived through the battle 64 years ago.
Who knew we would partake in the Battle of Incheon? By doing so, we took back Seoul, but I would really like to be with my fallen comrades, or at least see them in my dreams.
As the saying goes, forgive but don't forget. This ceremony not only serves to pay respect to the fallen, but to show this generation and generations to come of how lucky they are to enjoy the freedoms they have today. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Incheon.
The interim chief of the main opposition party here in Korea may be on the verge of resigning. If that happens, it will bring about even more disarray to the opposition that's been missing a chairman figure for more than a month now. Our National Assembly correspondent Kim Young-gil tells us more.
Park Young-sun of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy doesn't just appear to be thinking about stepping down as interim chief. There are speculations she may even quit the party altogether. It comes amid pressure from within the main opposition bloc to step down both as the chief of its emergency committee and as its floor leader.
We've been urging floor leader Park Young-sun for her voluntary resignation. If she does not step down, we will have to put some pressure on her to do so.
The contention stems from Park's handling of a special bill that would set up an investigation into April's ferry disaster. Park on 2 separate occasions reached agreements with the ruling Saenuri party on the legislation, but both times the compromise was met with fierce criticism from the victims' families and from within her own party. Park looked to step aside last week by appointing 2 co-chairmen to lead its emergency committee, but the proposal was quickly batted down by senior party members, who objected to those who were nominated. With Park on the outs, veteran lawmakers with the opposition party have already begun thinking about who her replacement should be and call for someone who is more moderate. Whoever that next leader is will walk into a party torn apart by factionalism and infighting. The party also remains at odds with the ruling Saenuri party at the National Assembly, which has passed 0 bills in recent months because of the ferry bill standoff. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
It's time for this week's Industry Insight. Today we focus on 3D printing. While hobbyists may get a kick and niche industries like hospitals can create new treatments from 3D printers, how far are we from the day when everyone has one in their house? Our Kim Ji-yeon went out to find the answer.
3D printers are not commonly used by average consumers in Korea due to its huge price tag. The hardware sells around $2,000. In order to break down such economic barriers, 3D developer founded by its parent trading company Mirae International Trade launched a leasing and rental program for the public.
We want to lead more people can use the 3D printing technology because we believe this is a very good thing. It is very good for the industrial efficiency. Also, it can help people to get their own customized product. Also, they can change people's lifestyle. So, in order to expand this new technology, we were trying to watch what is the real barrier of the market.
With monthly rental fees set at $35 and an option to buy at the end of a 2-year contract period, the company says its printer leasing program creates easier accessibility for customers to try the new hardware. The program also assures the machine will continue to operate properly even after its purchase. The company says its customers are not limited to a specific group, but includes manufacturers of toys and jewelry, as well as R&D centers, universities, and ordinary people.
Yeah, for example, we can try to make my own shoes. Maybe somebody can scan my feet, and then maybe we can design. We can change some design to make my own shoes, and then I can just print it.
Another company is also trying to widen the use of 3D printers by making the hardware easier to use for the average customer. Open Creators, the country's first startup company in the 3D printing industry, says its printer, called the Almond, is by far the easiest printer to use yet. For most people, it takes just the afternoon to get it up and running.
Almond has an auto-leveling function. It checks 9 points of a surface and adjusts the appropriate slope of the bed, eliminating the need for the user to manually attach any nuts and bolts. Also, there's a cooling pen that brings down the temperature of the melted material, which improves printing quality.
And for consumers who are worried about looks, the Almond has both substance and style. It was awarded some of the world's most renowned design awards, including the Red Dot and IDEA Awards. Open Creators said it's working toward a vision to try to create an atmosphere, a culture where every household has a 3D printer in their homes, such as appliances like TVs and vacuum cleaners. The company offers a weekly workshop open to anyone who wants to maximize the utility of its product.
These efforts by the 3D printing industry are expected to open up the technology to the mainstream and pave the way for more specialized applications to become a part of our everyday lives. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News. The number of visitors from China is growing exponentially every year, and not surprisingly, the spending clout of Chinese tourists to Korea is having an overwhelming positive effect on the stock prices of Korean firms and the tourism sector. Our Hwang Jie has the details.
In Seoul's bustling shopping district of Myeongdong, it's very easy to find Chinese tourists, and the ever-increasing number of visitors from China is driving strong gains in tourism-related shares. According to the Korea Exchange, the stock prices of 31 firms listed on the local bourse whose brands are popular among the Chinese have risen 51% on average since the end of last year. Contrast that against the 1.1% gain the benchmark Kospi posted over the same period. Because of this, many Korean businesses that used to rely on domestic consumption by Koreans are eyeing these high-spending customers from across the West Sea. In general, Chinese people are much wealthier than they used to be. China's gross national income per capita last year stood at over $6,700. That's more than 5 times higher than in 2003. And due to the popularity of Korean pop culture in China, experts say the country's China's spending power has a massive impact on Korean companies, particularly those in the entertainment, cosmetic, and clothing industries. And with more Chinese tourists forecast to visit Korea during the upcoming Chinese holiday season early next month and the Incheon Asian Games that kick off this week, expectations are high that they'll give domestic demand in Korea a much-needed boost. Hwang Ji, Arirang News.
An international summit of more than 30 countries has wrapped up in Paris to address a rising threat of the Islamic State militant group.
With more, we turn to Paul Yi at the News Center. Paul, what were some of the concrete measures that have come from these talks?
Well, following the meeting, dozens of nations issued a joint statement promising to help Iraq by all possible means to combat IS, including military support. The Paris conference brought together top leaders and diplomats on Monday with the aim of tackling the jihadists through political, economic, and humanitarian measures. Addressing officials at the summit, French President François Hollande warned that there was no time to waste.
The fight of the Iraqi people against terrorists is ours as well, and we have to act together, and this is the whole purpose of this conference. We have to stand by the Iraqi authorities clearly, loyally, and strongly, and there's not a moment to be lost.
Meanwhile, Iran has rejected the global plan to fight the militant group, saying that any U.S. incursion would repeat the same mistakes made in Iraq 10 years ago. And moving on to the Southeast Asia, a massive typhoon has slammed into the Philippines, forcing thousands of people in the capital city of Manila to flee to higher ground. Torrential rains and strong winds are said to be hitting the northern part of the country, as several towns remain flooded and still without power as of this Monday. National Disaster Agency officials say the tropical storm made landfall on Sunday evening with wind speeds of up to 160 kilometers per hour. As many as 8,000 people have been affected, with the majority evacuated to shelters across more than a dozen provinces. An average of 20 typhoons batter the Philippines each year, mostly during the rainy season from June to October. Back to Europe, the results are out, and Sweden's opposition party has claimed its first major victory in the country's general elections in nearly 8 years. Sweden's center-left Socialist Democrat leader Stefan Löfven emerged as the victor on Sunday. However, his party fell short of a parliamentary majority.
Tonight, Sweden has answered that now we need a change, now we need a new path. And my most important message today is the following. I'm prepared to start looking into the possibility of forming a new government for Sweden.
Löfven's next challenge will likely be a political impasse, as the anti-immigration far-right emerged as the third biggest party. The Nordic region's biggest economy also faces high unemployment and a potential housing bubble that threatens the country's economic stability. And finally, the fashion world is buzzing with excitement as leading designers have descended on London to show off their latest collections, with major retailer Topshop breaking new ground, this time on social media. The British fashion giant recently live-streamed its debut at London Fashion Week exclusively on social networks Instagram and Facebook. Hungry shoppers were then given early access to the new clothing lines on its website.
So I think our customer, as we know, everybody spends all their waking moments on all these new platforms, apps, gadgets, Instagram, Twitter, whatever they're doing. That's our business. Yeah. So I think that's the new communication world.
The company hopes the latest venture will help boost growth, as online clothing sales in Britain are set to reach over $17.4 billion by the end of this year. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to sports. And starting with the final LPGA major of the season, the Evian Championship in France was won by a Korean golfer. And while you might expect that golfer to be Park In-bi or Park Se-ri, it was a 19-year-old sensation that took home the top prize in dramatic fashion. SJ Lee has this report.
19-year-old Kim Hyo-ju is a star in the KLPGA, but after this weekend, she's a superstar in the one that counts, the LPGA. The 20th-ranked Korean started off the event shooting an amazing 10 under 61 in the first round and went into the final round in the lead. Fellow Koreans Chang Ha-na, Heo Mi-jung, and Chen Ha-yeon piled the pressure on Kim, but it was Australia's Kerry Webb, a 7-time major winner, who stormed through in the back nine to take a one-stroke lead going into the 18th hole. But the Korean teenager kept her composure and birdied a tough putt to put her tied for the lead. The pressure was too much for the 39-year-old Webb, who would bogey on the final hole, giving Kim the season's final tour major.
I'm very happy I won. When I finished, I felt out of this world. I felt terrible when I bogeyed on the in-course par 3, but I was able to birdie on what I thought was the toughest hole, so I feel great.
It might be her very first LPGA Tour major win, but given this performance, we'll be hearing a lot more about Kim Hyo-ju in the years to come. SJ Lee, Arirang News.
And we stay with golf, but this time to the men. The FedEx Cup playoffs wrapped up with 5-year pro Billy Horschel taking home the Tour Championship and the top playoff prize. Horschel got off to a tight lead and held off Rory McIlroy and Chris Kirk to add his second piece of hardware in as many weeks. The 2 wins propelled him to the playoff victory, netting him the first place sum of $10 million. And going to basketball, Team USA capped off their dominating FIBA World Cup campaign with a 129-92 demolition of Serbia Sunday evening in Madrid. Kyrie Irving led the way with 26 points, going an impressive 6-for-6 from beyond the arc and earning himself the tournament MVP award. Now with the win, the U.S. added their 3rd straight World Cup trophy and 6th overall, and also booked their spot in the 2018, or rather 2016, Rio Summer Olympics. And now the Asian Games kick off this Friday with thousands of athletes coming together in Incheon to compete. Even the KBO has gone on break until October to accommodate its players taking part, as Korea aims for a great performance on its home turf. Song Ji-sun has the preview of the Games.
The Asian Games is Asia's biggest sports celebration. This year's 16-day event, being held in the South Korean port city of Incheon, will showcase the talents of some 10,000 athletes. North Korean athletes will be among them, and the first wave of their delegation arrived in the South last Thursday. But North Korean cheerleaders will not be making the trip. They were in hand for the Asian Games in Busan back in 2002, but are skipping this year's event after failing to reach an agreement with the South over their accommodations and expenses. Looking ahead to the competition, South Korea is aiming for a top 2 finish in the overall medal count for the 5th consecutive event, with its eye on winning at least 90 golds. China has been a fixture atop the medal count dating all the way back to the 1982 Games. Preliminaries for several sports kicked off over the weekend, and Team South Korea got off to a quick start. The men's football team beat Malaysia 3-0, and the women's squad trounced Thailand 5-0. If you want to catch some of the action in person, the organizing committee announced that only 20% of the overall tickets have been sold as of this Monday. Seats are also still available for Friday's opening ceremony, which starts at 6 p.m. For more information, visit incheon2014ag.com. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Well, we can't wait for the Asian Games, but leaving that there, let's go to South Korea's top female climber, Kim Ja-in. She's reached the top of the summit of her sport, winning her first World Championship title. Over in Spain, she bested a 48 other women with a whopping 80 points and was the only climber in the finals to reach the top. Now it's turning out to be a great season for the 26-year-old, who's also leading the World Cup standings. And that does it for now. This has been Stephen Che. Stay tuned for the weather, which is up next.
Hope your week is off to a great start, everyone. Welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the latest weather updates. It was a breezy and cloudy day here in Seoul, and similar conditions were experienced in most regions. Well, this early autumn weather will continue, but those in Gangwon-do province could get light passing sporadic showers tomorrow. Now, the big gap in temperatures from day to night will also remain for a while, so make sure to grab a light cardigan on your ways out. Expect warm and breezy conditions through the rest of the week with fall showers forecast on Thursday and Wednesday and Thursday, that is, for Jeju and areas along the southern coast. Here are the numbers for Tuesday. Seoul and Gwangju make it to 28, while Busan reaches 27. As for other places, Daejeon and Jeju hit 26, Dokdo and Kumgang reach 23 and 24. That's all the updates for now, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight. See you then.
Thank you very much, Bo-kyung. And that's Primetime News for this Monday. I'm Kang Chery.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the same time tomorrow. Good night.